And welcome everybody to another Bangers and Classics podcast, and that's with me, James Ruppert, and him, David Malloy. And what's David been up to this week?
Well, we'll come back to that perhaps.
All
But
right.
James, I have some car spots.
Oh, good.
I have some car spots. The first of which was quite pertinent when I saw
Mm,
it. It was the day after we recorded the podcast we just put out yesterday,
mm.
and you may say the featured car on it was the Rover 75.
It was, yeah.
Well, I was driving through the next village, a couple of miles away, and lo and behold, there was a Rover 75 parked on the pavement outside a shop,
Mm.
and it looked in absolutely pristine nick, I have to say. It was metallic gold. I didn't research the colour. I don't know it offhand, but it was just sitting there looking actually really, really good. So there you go.
Mm.
Synchronicity or what?
Yeah, well, there you go.
And then,
Mm.
day after that, I was coming back from the M74 out in the countryside and heading in the opposite direction towards the motorway was, and I thought this at first was a Mark V Ford Escort, but it wasn't. It was a Ford Orion.
All right.
An H plate Ford Orion in very vivid red, and it had a rear wing that looked to be an aftermarket one, but it actually fitted the car pretty well, and it looked to be in spiffing nick as well, and obviously being driven.
Yeah.
So that was good. So you're talking about, again, 30 plus year old car in use.
Mm.
And then a couple of days ago, outside the supermarket driving past was a Fiat Panda, an L registration Fiat Panda. So, you might say the classic shape Fiat Panda.
Yeah.
The phase 2 version of the classic shape.
Yeah.
But it looked pretty good. It looked, in used condition. It was clearly driven a lot. There was
Yeah.
a young lady driving it, and she seemed perfectly happy, and
Good.
absolutely she should be. So there we go. So that's my spots. But also,
Mm.
remember last week we spoke about a chap who played for the Marshall Amplifiers Works
That's
football
right.
team.
Yes, very much so.
Well, funnily enough, he's a friend of the family, and he phoned to speak to my mum a couple of days ago. So I spoke to him, and he confirmed, yep, he did indeed play for that team, and he knew Jim Marshall.
Goodness me.
So there you go. As for the rest of it, James, I've just been up to the usual things. I've been working on a new book,
Right.
getting towards the end of sort of part one of it, and then part two to be done, and hopefully it'll be out maybe in a month's time or so. So there we go, James. What about you? What have you seen and what have you been doing?
Well, oddly enough, David, I've got some breaking news in that I saw one of those new Defenders actually being used. So it wasn't on a school run. It was actually towing a trailer. On the trailer seemed to be either oxygen or acetylene bottles. But it was just the fact that there it was, one of those. And I was in my lorry at the time. There was no waves exchanged, so no one was harmed in the making of this. But it was just incredible to see someone using a brand new Defender
Hmm.
as a Defender. So there you go. So I may be the first person in the country to see that actually happen. I don't know if anybody can help. That'd be great. Apart from that, I've seen a few things. I saw a very interesting scene the other day, and it looked like a 10cc album cover. So
Oh.
it was a very bright day. Some old boy had obviously pushed his MGB uh, Roadster out of the garage so that he could use it, and he was watering his garden. And there was actually some school kids taking pictures of him doing that. They must have had permission because the way they were standing, it was very strange. So in two ways, yes, it did look like a sort of an era of 10cc cover by Hypnosis, if anybody is familiar with that.
Hmm.
And it also reassured you that, yeah, youngsters appreciate older vehicles, in that, yeah, there are some people at school think, yeah, that's a cool car. So there is hope for all of us. Apart from that, I saw a Rover P5 saloon, which was quite a shock. Sort of searching for petrol at our way, or fuel on the whole, has been very hard to come by recently. And I think they managed to. Well, they couldn't have found any because there wasn't any for me to fill up with. There was no E5 where I was, but it was nice to see a Rover P5 saloon, which was good. And then finally in the car park, within minutes of seeing that, I saw a Morris Minor, and it was one that was old enough to have the trafficators. So it actually had plumbed in proper indicators as well, but it also had those flappy paddle things that come out of the side of the car to indicate which way it's going. And I don't think I've seen that for many years. So that
Mm.
was quite nice. But it was in good nick. But again, it was a used car. You could see that someone was using it. It wasn't just a show pony. It was actually out and about. So I was quite pleased with my little haul of scenarios and cars this week.
I imagine you would be, James.
I would, yeah.
It's a very good haul.
Yeah,
Well, I knew a chap who had a Triumph Stag he used to water his flower beds with.
really.
Yeah. He'd wheel it out, the guy would
Would
join the flower
it?
beds, turn the engine on, put the bonnet up, steam would come
Yeah.
out of it.
All right.
Obviously, as the steam cooled, you get water
Yeah.
droplets fall on the flower bed.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. I think that's terribly unfair, David, to pick on the
I know, it's
on
shocking.
stags like that. But there you go.
I know, I'm a disgrace. Also, there was some news as well I forgot to
Oh, was there?
mention. The Jeep that was once mentioned in this podcast, Jeep has been mentioned a few times
Yeah.
in this podcast, has been exported.
Oh, right.
It's gone to Ireland, and hopefully it will live again there, because we got some very bad news about it from the garage and sold it for spares or repair. It's a long saga, which I won't bore listeners with, but what I would say is don't do what we do and buy it blind. Make sure you get a car, particularly that type, checked out before you buy it. And that's what we did with its replacement. We had it checked out. And we have now, as a workhorse, got a BMW X5. A somewhat venerable X5. Needs a little tidying here and there, which will be attended to. It's nothing drastic. And I have driven it. And yes, I am impressed. So there you go. I actually am impressed by a BMW. I preferred
I'm pleased to hear that.
it. Well, as you know, I had a couple of Z4s in the past, one of which I liked and one of which I didn't, but neither of which really handled very well on wet roads. I thought the X5 was much nicer to drive.
They're great cars. They're great.
Yeah, so I was very, very pleased with that. And I think on that unexpectedly positive note, let's take a quick break. This is Bangers and Classics, the motoring podcast presented by James Ruppert and David Malloy, otherwise known as the men that time forgot. Or we're back here in Bangers and Classics after the break. Yeah, we're back after the break, and we are going to do this week's Banger or Classic. And it's a car that, well, didn't make much of an impression in the UK. They sold a few, but it really never gained much traction at all. It's the Fiat Stilo, which was produced from 2001 to 2007 in Europe, and I think elsewhere in the world, possibly Brazil, was it? It went to about 2010. Anyway, Mr. Ruppert, I think you can tell us what you think of it and whether or not it's a banger or it's a classic.
It's a banger, David.
Oh, straight in there.
Straight, yeah, you have to, because it is one of those cars. I can't remember. I think it was 2001 to 2007, and it replaced effectively the Brava and Bravo, didn't it? I mean, it was a solid enough little thing, and at least they weren't going down some retro route. To sort of recreate past glories or anything. They were trying to create something genuinely new, but I don't think very many people cared in the UK about it, which probably explains why there's not very many about at all now. It isn't terribly exciting. It'll probably do a job now. There's some small petrol engines, which will probably last a bit. There's although there was an exciting one, wasn't there? Arbath thing with a 2.4 engine and stuff like that. But it sort of didn't touch the sides really. I think if you stopped anybody, even if they like cars, I think they might struggle to create a mental picture of what a Stilo was. I mean, it's quite a good name.
Yeah.
But apart from that, no, it was just a workaday sort of thing. It's sort of the equivalent of a Ford Escort, I suppose, in a way. But a JTD 80, as a diesel workhorse would probably suit somebody very, very, very well. You get 50 miles per gallon out of that. There was a 3-door and a 5-door, but there's nothing too exciting. It's a banger.
Well,
really, but you could disagree, of course.
I think I may have to. James.
Oh, right.
I mean, Stilo, I think it's a different spelling, but does that not mean pen in French?
It could be. I don't know.
I think it does. I can delete this bit if I'm wrong, of course.
Yeah.
And of course I will. As you say, James, it was 3 5-door hatch.
Yeah.
And there was an estate version as well.
Oh, yes, it
Um,
was.
I remember the actual advert when it came out as a television commercial, and it was pretty rubbish. It was pretty underwhelming. The rest of Europe seemed to get an advert, and I don't think we ever got it here, with Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which was quite comical. Barrichello was driving it around the circuit involved in the race, pulls into the pits. Schumacher's all suited up, ready to get in. Barrichello won't let him in. This happens a couple of times. He makes pit stops, and he locks the doors on Schumacher at one point. And he comes in for his third pit stop, and there's no one there to service the car. And you can see Schumacher and the mechanics all playing pool or something. And there's a sign saying self-service. Schumacher laughingly pointing to it, which was quite good. Schumacher appeared in a couple of adverts for Fiat around that time.
Yeah.
He also did one, I think, for the Bravo, the later Bravo with Kimi Raikkonen, which again I don't think came here.
No.
Which was typical Kimi in it. They played to his strengths, which was saying not a lot, and turned into a great strength. But go back to the Stilo. It was kind of Germanic, really. It didn't look terribly Italian. Now, I wasn't really too fussed about looking at it. I thought it was quite bland at the time, but looking at it again, there's one version in particular I think actually does look good. We'll come back to that. I think, with the benefit of hindsight, it actually wasn't a bad-looking little car. It had electric power-assisted steering. As you say, James, it was an Abarth version with a 2.4-litre engine with 170 brake horsepower, which is not a vast amount when you consider the capacity of the engine.
Yeah.
But never mind. And some of those were lumbered with Fiat's automatic, I don't know, what was it called? The Selectronic or the Celespeed box?
Selector,
which, something like that. Bose Selector box.
Selector box.
Yeah. Which wasn't a great idea. And Fiat lost a shed load of money on them, apparently. And they were only 769,000 built. But they also produced a Michael Schumacher Special Edition. This isn't to be confused with the Citroën C4 Lobe Edition, which really wasn't very exciting. The Schumacher Edition was actually very nice. And in the UK, you could have a Schumacher GP Edition, which was fettled by ProDrive. But I had to see if one for sale. Couldn't find one. Well, I could find one in the UK. It wasn't the best one. There's one for sale in Australia, and it looks absolutely amazing. It's a Schumacher Edition, Russell Corsa. It's got the perforated seats. It looks more or less as if it's 6 months old. And when you see it in its splendour, it's got a nice Sender body kit that was standard on it. You think, yeah, that really does work for me. It actually is a nice-looking little car. Apparently drives pretty well too. So I have to say, that would be tempting to me. Absolutely no question about it. One like that in that sort of condition. And of course, they were all in that sort of condition when they were new. So simply because of that, and only because of that, I'm going to say it's a classic. But the balance of opinion may be with you, James, because I think they only sold just over 40,000 in the UK, and there are fewer than 2,000 left. But I don't care. I like that Schumacher edition that's for sale in Australia. And what I'll do is I'm going to put a link up to it on the podcast when this episode goes out, so people can judge it for themselves. See if I'm right about it or if their opinion differs. And there we go. So I'm classic, and you're still banger, I take it?
Oh, very much banger, yeah. Absolutely. Oh. Even more banger after listening to your impassioned plea, David. I'm sorry.
That's twice in a week. I mean, first of all, I couldn't persuade you to like the Talbot Solara last week.
No, that's true.
Yeah, so now we've got... Oh, yeah, you're dissing the Fiat Stilo as well. What is this podcast coming to?
Well, you're creating a forecourt of mediocrity, David, and I can't let that continue.
No. I'm going for the alternative choices here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, things that perhaps didn't get their day in the sun for various reasons, but maybe were harshly judged. And maybe with just a little work, just a little bit of tidying, just a little bit of effort, back in the day by designers and marketing people, there could have been something a lot better. But that's the Schumacher Stilo that's for sale in Australia is absolutely gorgeous. I would definitely have it. If I could afford it, and B, if it was here. But since probably neither of those things is true, I'll just have to admire it from afar. Anyway, we'll move on, shall we? And we have a challenge this week. But I think what we'll do is we'll do that after the break.
Oh, okay.
Because you're going to be surprised, James.
Really?
Well, did I cheat again this week, or did I follow the rules?
I have no idea.
Well, I followed the rules, but I still think you're going to be surprised. And I've also written down the piece of paper here, the car that I think you were going to go for.
Oh, okay, go on then.
Okay. All I'll say is, just now, the model name's got 7 letters.
Right.
And that's it. And we'll be back after the break to find out if I'm right or if, yet again, I'm wrong. And now a word from our sponsors. And we are back after the break with this week's challenge. And the challenge is to find a coupe version of a 1970s British-built saloon. Has to be roadworthy, insofar as we can tell from adverts, but there are no other criteria. You can buy it anywhere. It can cost any amount of money.
Mm.
And James is going to go first.
Am I?
Yeah, well, I think so.
Oh, right.
I'm desperate to know.
Are you?
Read your mind on this and picked out the car you're going to go for.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, it's not an easy challenge, really, is it? It's quite difficult. It's very specific. And even though you go off piste, usually by the one you pick, David, but uh, and it was very odd that I'd already picked this by the time I'd actually seen a Rover P5 saloon. So what I obviously picked was a Rover P5B coupe,
Was that from the
which is
70s?
from the 70s. I've got a 1971 Rover
Oh,
P5B coupe for sale.
I'm wrong then.
Well, I don't know.
No, I'm wrong.
Now, I looked at a few of these because the price of them they do vary. There's some which are extremely expensive. You can easily get 30, 40 grand very, very quickly. But I found one which seemed to have been in the same family for 40 years. Um, the leather was extremely creased but original, and it looks fantastic. It's in zircon blue with a white roof, so it's not dull at all to look at. And it's just 14,495, and that seemed to me like incredible value for money. 98,000 the mileage. It's for sale in London, as I say. It's just got two previous owners after the last one for 42 years. A massive history file, and it just seemed like sort of a magnificent car to drive around in. And it's been MOT'd as well, so it's MOT to the end of the year. Stainless steel exhaust. It just looks like quite a fantastic car. I mean, obviously you need to know a lot more. You need to stick it on a ramp and have a closer look at it. But really, from the pictures and the description, it looks like the most magnificent Rover P5B coupe you could buy, and very good value. Seems like half the cost of some of them. So yeah, I rather like that. I'd be interested to know what you thought I was going to buy, but there you go. That's the one I did.
I thought you were going to go for a Granada.
Well, I was going to look for a Granada, but I actually didn't hold out too much hope. And because I'm terribly mean, David, I just think, oh, someone's going to charge me too much money for that. So even though you've given me all the money in the world, I don't really buy cars like that, unfortunately. So yeah, I did think about it. It did cross my mind. You're not incorrect in that I thought about it, but yeah, instead of going for a Marina, I thought I'd go for a four-door big coupe.
But James, you make the
Yeah.
Getty family look like paupers. Unbelievable.
Well, what on earth have you gone for, David? Because that's always the more exciting choice. Because all of a sudden, you picked a submarine or a spaceship usually. So there you go.
Bit of both, really.
Yeah, is it? Oh, okay.
I went for an example of a car with the most iconic door handles in history.
All right.
What is it, James?
Well, that would be a Marina then, wouldn't
Yes. And I have to say, that was my intention right from the start with this. I'm going to go for a Marina. Nobody ever gives it any love whatsoever.
No.
So I'm going to go for one.
Yeah.
And I found two.
Oh, wow.
Same place, they're both in Denmark.
Yeah.
I think one's right-hand drive.
Yeah.
And I'll just check that for you, if I may, Mr. Ruppert. I believe one is right-hand drive and one is left. But the one I'm going for is the left. No, they're both left-hand drive. My mistake. But the one I'm going for is left-hand drive anyway. It's a 1300 Super Coupe from 1975. It's in orange. And the advert says that it's covered 37,000 kilometres, which is about roughly just under 23,000 miles from new. Apparently never been used in the winter. And it was the same couple had it from new until 2020 for 45 years. Never been restored, and the ad says it's totally free of rust. and it certainly does look in extremely good condition. The underbonnet area, yeah, you could give it a tidy up, really detail it for a concours, and it's a dent in one of the side panels, so not a big dent, but it's there. But you've got, a car that's complete. It's very much a period piece. You've got all 4 original hubcaps there. You've got a gloriously 70s looking Blaupunkt push button radio.
Yeah.
Which looks basic even by but Blaupunkt standards, because obviously if you bought a cheap Blaupunkt radio, you were getting the absolute minimum equipment with it, minimum functionality, nothing else. To get a really good, a really all singing, all dancing Blaupunkt, you had to spend lots of dough, as you know. And of course, this one, well, whoever bought it didn't. It's got 58 horsepower, which is fine. That's all it really needs, because you're not going to be anywhere fast, and you won't want to drive Marina quickly anyway. Lovely black final interior, and yeah, it's absolutely spiffing. Costs about £7,900. Obviously, there'll be import fees on it. Maybe you can negotiate because it's a garage that's selling it. They've also got, for another just over £2,000, if you really wanted it, you could have an earlier, a 1972 1.8 TC coupe, which has done about 25,500 miles. It's in a sort of, well, I suppose a sort of tan colour, I suppose you'd call it. I have to say, I didn't like it as much, as there is a dent somewhere in it. Yeah, it's down, I think, on the lower swage line. I think there's a dent. It's got styled steel wheels. Again, a bluey black final interior in this one. Fake wood paneling. It's got more instruments, obviously being the 1.8. But I actually thought the 1300 was in better condition. And, since you're not going to be belting around anywhere quickly in the Marina, why not go for the cheaper version? But, if you're really into Marinas, hey, you're not going to find 2 with this sort of low mileage and probably in this sort of rust-free condition easily. Why not buy the 2 of them? Start your own Marina museum. And of course, you're going to say, James, I'm bringing the podcast down into the depths of mediocrity once again, aren't you?
Well, just let you know, you have been breaking up a bit, David. I don't know if you want to listen back to that.
I can't really. I'll do it again, right?
But for me, that just increased the enjoyment. I'm glad that you've located 2, because it makes it much easier to have them crushed. So it'd be great.
Oh, shocking!
That could be arranged.
No, you can't.
I don't think
there's. I think you're not Jeremy Clarkson, for goodness sake. You don't want to be Jeremy Clarkson.
Terrible things ever. They're just really uninspiring and dreadful. And I remember them at the time. My dad had one as like a loan car, I can remember, and even though I was only have been about 12 or 13 and quite irritating, I really just thought, this is just awful. I thought, what a terrible, terrible, terrible car this is, and it was. And so I haven't changed my mind since. So yeah, I've made it my mind. I do it undercover, obviously, but I do go around the world extinguishing any surviving Morris Marinas, and in particular coupes.
Right. Well, just to add a little bit to
it. Just silence there.
No, not really. I'm just thinking, well, what can I say to that? I mean, dear. The man's a hooligan. That's it.
That's right.
I wash my hands. Well, quite frequently these days, right. Obviously. What the ad goes on to say about the 1.8 is it's driven no more than, as the ad says, 500 kilometres in the last 25 years, and mainly only for inspection. And it's got a little surface rust in a few places. There's never been any welding or anything done to it. And they say it's one of Europe's finest of its kind. Now, again, I know you don't like Marinas. They weren't objectively great cars, but they're a souvenir from a decade that we both lived through, a decade of change, and an important decade for Britain in many ways. Not always a good decade for Britain in many ways, but yeah, I rather like them, so they get my vote. We'll let the listeners decide. If you think that I am completely wrong to be supporting the Marina on this, do tell us. If you think James is completely wrong to be wanting to destroy them all, please tell us. In fact, especially tell us if you think James is wrong, because that'll be even funnier.
Yeah, but it's a really simple choice, isn't it? What would you rather have, a Rover P5 coupe or a Morris Marina? I fail to see that anybody would disagree with that choice there.
Me. I would, because I would. I just don't know. The P5, I don't know. I've never really took to it. Have to be honest and say that. It's just something about it. But the Marina, okay, we can talk about how it was a rubbish car, because frankly, it wasn't anything like what it should have been. It should have been a good car. They should have, they had plenty of time to develop it, and they messed up as they often did. But there's still something about it that I like. I like the fact that people like these things, that they don't care what other people think. They're going to go out and get one and have it and cherish it. That's great, because it's an individual thing. It's all about what the individual thinks. It's not going to be bullied or kowtow to peer pressure. Do your own thing. Anyway, and on that note, we'll take a break and we'll come back with, I think, yet another bone of contention between Mr. Ruppert and I. It's this week's Danger Zone. This is Bangers and Classics, the motoring podcast equivalent of Mr. Magoo. We have absolutely no idea where we're going. And so we are back after the break. We're going to go into the final segment of the podcast. But first of all, I'd just like to say that James is always saying that he likes to spread peace and love everywhere.
I do, absolutely.
But it's just emerged that what he really likes to spread is pieces of Morris Marina everywhere.
There you go.
I'm shocked and appalled here. I really am.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll see what he makes of this. It's this week's Danger Zone, and the Danger Mobile is, and Russ Wallace will be listening to this, I'm sure, the guy who's I've done a couple of books with. Russ will be listening because the Danger Mobile is the Citroen XM, which ran from 1989 to 2000, and Russ has got one. So, James, can you think of any good reasons why we should be looking to preserve the XM?
Well, it is a thing of wedge-tastic beauty, isn't it, really? It's a lovely design that looks like nothing else on Earth, really, or in space, really. You could put a couple of wings on it, and I think people have, and it looks like an interstellar support vehicle, really, doesn't it? It looks as though you could fly through the air. It's a wonderful thing. I mean, obviously, it's completely mad when you consider, well, it was slated to go up against things like BMWs and Mercedes, which in many ways were actually quite boring by comparison to look at. But it was a time when Citroen tried very, very hard to be different. So there's a lot to celebrate there. But there's also a lot to worry about. If it breaks down, it will cost you a bit to sort out. Oddly enough, I've been looking at quite a lot for sale recently. They're not outrageously expensive, and there are ones that have been sorted out hugely in that someone's invested a lot of money in the suspension and whatever. And I saw there's a really tidy one, not that far away from me, and it was $2,500 at a dealer, and it's had a lot spent on it. And you think for most people, yes, if you wanted to take a risk, that would be a very sensible way to have a large family car. And it was a diesel as well, so actually the consumption wouldn't be too bad. But yeah, overall, I really like them, and it would be a very comfortable and rather lovely thing to own.
Yes, I mean, you say that you could use it as a spaceship. Well, obviously, you think about this. If you're making a low-budget sci-fi film, stick a couple of fiberglass wings onto it. Obviously, make it removable and don't damage the car when you're doing it. There you go. It's a cheap spaceship for you. But yeah, I mean, Citroen introduced it as a replacement for the long-lasting and much-loved CX range.
Yeah.
Even though CX did continue for a while, alongside the XM, I think for a couple of years anyway. But this is where things fall down. Citroen hoped to replicate the sales success of the CX, and it didn't. It was very much diminishing returns. They only sold 334,000 of them in the 11 years it was in production, which in turn dwarfs the number of examples of the XM success of the C6 that were sold. So Citroen, unfortunately, had to move out of the big car market because there was no point. They just simply weren't finding the buyers, which was a shame because they offered something different. The XM came along, as you say, in 1989. It had Bertone styling, so that's always usually a good thing. In this case, was a good thing. It had hydroactive suspension, so a slight development of the previous hydropneumatic units, which of course were good enough to be used by Rolls-Royce. But the car was blighted, and even the suspension was blighted by electrical issues. And that was a weak point. And I think many of those were later sorted out, and there are fixes for them. If you have an XM today, you can sort those out fairly easily, and I think fairly cheaply for the most part, which is a good thing. But back in the day, it harmed the car's reputation and harmed sales. Also lacked Diravi, which was Citroen's very, very clever variable assistance power steering system, which automatically returned wheels to the straight ahead position if you took your hands off the wheel. And the XM didn't have it. And I don't know why. It seems a bit odd because it was a great system. Very, very clever indeed. But what you did get was a roomy car that looked like nothing else, as we've said. Very good range of engines, ranging from a 2-litre 8-valve petrol engine, then 16-valve and turbo versions of that, up to a 3-litre V6, and plus some turbo diesels. And you could have it in a 5-door hatch or an estate. It was facelifted in 1994. The styling of the facelifted version was something of a retrograde step over the earlier versions. However, there were some useful improvements made to it. But there are cars that are known as Phase 1.5 vehicles from about 1993 or so, which have effectively the Phase 2 improvements without the compromised looks. So that's a good one to go for if you can find one. In terms of numbers, well, as I said, they sold about 1/3 of them. In the UK now, as at the last published figures by the Department of Transport, the DVLA, or whoever does it these days, there was 151 on the road with 622 examples on Soren, and that was it, which ain't a lot. And it's such an interesting looking car, a good car to drive, a good car to ride in, that it really would be a damn shame if those disappeared too. So again, what we'd say is, if you're into cars that are interesting, you like a bit of room, you like your clever engineering, and you don't really spend too much money on these either because they're not vastly expensive, as James has said, then Citroen XM is the way to go. Save one.
Yeah, I think we should go and get one as a Bangers and Classes support vehicle. I think really. So we can go, instead of wasting money on hotel bills, we can lay out in the back of our very own XM.
We could have a sort of tent with it. But the trouble is, James, we're buying so many cars for the support fleet, it's going to look like the wacky races before long.
That's a good laugh, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? Collector's cars, every so often, we'd have to stop and collect the bits that fell off of them all.
Yes, exactly.
Who cares? It would be fun, and that's what it's about. Anyway, I think we've covered just about everything we need to cover this week, James. I can't think of anything else.
No, I don't think so.
No, I think we've plumbed the depths as usual.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, and we did have quite a good fight halfway through. And if you're just coming to this late, you have to rewind to hear that. But there you go.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, James is all for going out and bashing various Morris Marinas around with a lump hammer. And he dissed his Fiat Stilo as well, which is appalling. We did, however, agree in the Citroen XM. So that's one thing. Who knows what next week will hold?
Well, exactly.
Let's find out, shall we, next week. Thank you very much for listening. Please take care. And
please have a go at that and listen to all our positive vibes that we send out.
Yep, absolutely. And if you've got a Morris Marina and you see James coming, for goodness sake, throw a tarpaulin over it and hide it from him.
Either that or throw a Hammer Horror actress over it and I'll be distracted. There you go.
Oh, before we stop.
What?
Oh, God, yeah, Hammer Horror actresses. There's a chap I sometimes chat to on social media. He writes books about various interesting things. And he likes old and unusual horror films and sci-fi films. He's been watching one recently called Star Crash. Guess who stars in it?
No idea.
Your pal Caroline Munro.
Excellent.
A young Caroline Munro is in this, and I believe she's in the lead role, though I think her voice may have been dubbed in it. I've not seen the film. I am told it's absolutely appalling.
Yeah,
but
it would be, but that's okay.
But nonetheless, certainly, it's Caroline. If you like Caroline Munro, go and check it out. And incidentally, James, have you heard back from her yet about your Mini Cooper offer?
No, I wonder why not, but no. I think they've got more important things to do. They've got a TV station to run rather than keep old motoring journalists amused and happy.
They could make a documentary about it when James met Caroline.
Well, exactly.
There you go. I'm pitching that to them now.
Oh, okay.
So if you're listening, people from Talking Pictures TV, there's the pitch for you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you where you can send the check later.
Okay.
And on that note, everybody, we are going to say goodbye this time. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.